Whisper, welcome to the Kriegsspiel Umpiring Chat Show. Thanks for coming.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on. Where in the world do you sit? We don't want to know specific street numbers, addresses, any of that kind of stuff. But where in the world do we find you today?
I am based out of the Washington, D.C. metro area.
Oh my
Um,
goodness, look at that. Perfect. DC metro area, an exciting place. The center of the action. Good for you.
yeah.
Uh, cool. So, as an umpire, what are you working on these days? You're always a spokesman for some of the modern era stuff. What are you working on now?
Yeah. So currently I'm, well, for the last couple of months, I've been working on just mirroring three different systems for ground, air, and sea for a modern operational scale game.
Oh,
I'm kind of working towards a larger project, and then the test games are kind of like games I run along the way.
right. And the so you've done a lot of work, or we've certainly seen some great product from you around the modern stuff. What's the attraction there? What's the thoughts, or what first got you started interested in simulating modern combat?
I mean, it's just like an interesting topic because we don't see, generally speaking, we don't see near peer conflicts anymore, at least not at a high intensity. You
Right.
know, you have examples like, oh, the Ukraine war. We can take a look at that, or we can go and look at some instances within the Syrian civil war and a few other conflicts that are going on, unfortunately, around the world. But generally speaking, those aren't at, you're not throwing whole cores,
Right.
with one exception. You're not throwing whole cores at the problem. Usually it's smaller scale actions that maybe spread across like a very wide front, but you're not seeing maneuver warfare like you would see in World War II or what was predicted for the Cold War if that ever went hot,
Right.
or even what you saw in like the Gulf War. So it's interesting because it's not very well explored. So it's kind of hard to find information on it, and that's why I find it interesting. I want to explore that space. I want to deliver a fun and educational experience around it. If I make my players feel like they are a modern brigade or division or corps commander, then I think I've succeeded. I want to present them the same problems. So
Do you think
take
there's a
some
lot
reading.
of is that because a lot of it's classified, or what do you? Because you hear about the professional folks doing certainly a lot of simulations. Do you think there's a lot out there we just don't see, or what have you found as you research?
As I've been reading along, because I've been trying to make a rule set like this for the last couple of years, actually, since a little while after I joined the IKS. Um, it's kind of a mixture of a few things. First is it really is unexplored even by the professionals. No one has seen two near peers go at it with
Right.
armies in any theater. On the other hand, yeah, a lot of the systems that make modern warfare so lethal and complicated, some of it's classified, some of it's just like really deep to understand. It's a lot of disparate systems that
Right.
all have to link together. And then lastly, it's kind of boring. To do that research and try to do a real war game, the professionals, um, they either simplify it so much that it's only they're using it to teach their junior officers tactical exercises,
Right.
like what do you do in a firefight, how do you take this hill, and by the time you have officers that are trying to lead a whole division, it's mostly administrative work, and you delegate that down, and there's not a lot of formal, or from what I can acquire, there's not a lot of formal education. It's all kind of taught on the job, and as circumstances arise, because every problem you're going to run into at that and the operational scale is going to be a little bit different. And you're going to have a lot of subject matter experts that are all going to tell you, yeah, my system will be good for taking out this target, or for securing this area, or providing these logistics. Um,
Right.
it's a whole bunch of people all talking to a handful of decision makers that then do the operation. So it's kind of boring because you have to read a lot about, like, how many HIMARS M142 can you fit on a cargo ship? so that we can have 8 on hand when we run this operation here in the desert, and
Right.
yeah.
So how do you, given the, I'm reminded, before I ask that question, I'm reminded of reading about from 1870 to 1914, the sheer amount of speculation about what an infantry formation should do, how artillery will affect the battlefield. I mean, there's just a massive amount of speculation. Then the World War One happened, and then everybody didn't need to speculate anymore. So that's what happened. So that it made it clearer in a weird way. Um, but if you go back and read some of the material from that period, there's a huge amount of speculation, and what you're plowing into is that speculative area of what what may happen in a period-to-period conflict. What how do you how do you take that, all that boring volume, and then trim it down into something that's enjoyable for players today? What's your technique?
I've gone through a few different iterations. The one I've arrived at is the original one that everyone arrives at. Sometimes the first thought is the best thought, and it's to abstract a lot of that complication away.
Right,
So for a war game, either an educational experience, like professionally, or even like within the IKS, where entertainment is a part of it, part of the wargaming, and why we want to do it, exploring the what if as realistically as we can. Um, Abstracting away a lot of the especially like logistical complexity, or the complexity of certain like weapon systems.
right,
it, you want them to be making the decisions, not to have a 4-year education in specifically one system. um, so that's kind of where I've arrived at. I'm caught between running like a 2d6 system to get a good spread of different results for, say, like ground combat, when 2 brigades walk into a bar, like who walks away. um, or using a D20 system, which I had used in a recent air operational test game I ran a few months back. They both have their merits. D20 allows for a wider spread of results, but 2D6 is going to be a little bit easier. If something feels wrong with a D20, it's kind of hard to change those numbers. Whereas
right.
with like a 2D6, you can pretty quickly adjust it by adding +1 or +2 or -3 or whatever it
Yeah.
needs to be.
And so, given the complexity of what you're modeling and what you're looking at, do you have any off-the-shelf games like Littoral Commander or anything like that that you use for inspiration, or do you develop on your own? How do you approach it?
I love Flashpoint Campaigns
Okay.
on the PC. I
Hmm.
wanted to take a look at Littoral Commander. That's something was on my radar, but having to save money recently, so wasn't able to like purchase it and try it out. The other thing that's kind of on my radar is Battle Group Clash, which isn't actually released yet, but Jan, or Let's Play History from the community, actually had a stream with the developer of a new board game that's coming out. Um, that takes a more like tactical operational approach to it. And how do I best describe it? Basically, it integrates all of the modern systems. You have drones that you can call in. You're giving orders to different units. There's electronic warfare that you have to account for, including like signals. um, and it's fascinating to me. And I got to see that stream that's now just a video on demand on YouTube on his channel, I believe. And I don't know, I've taken some inspiration from that, especially for like something I discarded in the past was the way a lot of professionals do it is they write out their orders ahead of time. So it's not even just the turn that they're writing the orders out. It's like,
Uh-huh.
no, 4 turns, 5 turns ahead, you're writing orders out from the very beginning. And then changing those is like one of the mechanics of that board game. I have taken that to heart, and that's actually going to be a part of my ground system going forward.
Well, how does that work then? So you talk us through that, because that's a unique approach, and maybe some other umpires can learn from it. What are you doing there with that?
So currently, how I have it written out is basically I know how long a scenario is going to run for. So let's say we're I was looking at the Sawalki Gap recently, right? So let's say there's a operation that's going to take place between a handful of divisions, defender, attacker. I know that the length of the scenario is going to be the first 48 hours, and that translates into what, like 8 turns.
Uh-huh.
So I have players write out the first 4 turns of orders, um, or I would
Huh.
have them. And so if they want to, they get a report every turn. The first turn report comes in, they realize, oh, I got to change something. Um, so, if you want to
And
change something,
what
you
do
have to
those
expose
four
yourself.
orders represent? Is that like four phases of a plan? Would be the idea behind that?
Yeah. So with large organizations, anyone who's worked in a big corporation or has participated in the military,
Sure.
or even just large volunteer organizations, there's a lot of friction. You can't have the big guy on top making every single decision ever. Instead, you try to go into a situation with a plan, and that's what those orders represent. So you get a report, but you're not necessarily changing what a unit is doing. Typically, by the time you hear about a problem, when you're like a brigadier um, or like a division commander, uh, by the time you hear about it, that information's hours old. So you can't be micromanaging everything. You have thousands of people that you have to be managing if you try to do that. It's impossible. So instead, you give a plan, you give rules of engagement or tools, techniques, and procedures, things that are either taught like long before that are just part of how the organization works or a part of the plan. And you only tweak as you go along if you need to, based off that. Sorry, I kind of lost track in the middle of that, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it's an intriguing idea because one of the things that we should examine as a community is that we tend to write a plan which sounds like, okay, everybody go to the hilltop or go to phase one, right? And then from there it turns into a dispatch flurry as everyone tries to figure out what's going on. That's not actually how large organizations run. They usually have a sense of reaction and a sense of kind of the standard procedures say, well, if the enemy's on the right, swing left or whatever, right? So capturing that in the essence of in essence in a four stage order is an interesting idea because it makes you think ahead of time about actions on contact, which you just said, right?
Yep, exactly. That's a really good way of putting actions on contact. That the other thing that you have to keep in mind for especially like modern warfare is every time you turn on your radio, every time you send any kind of electronic emission, you are now a target. And you
Right.
might have a bullet with your name on it, arriving within the next minute or two or less. So changing those orders is inherently dangerous. You don't want people to be broadcasting their exact location all the time. Instead, there's ways for like command posts to obscure that. But if you're a company on the move, you don't have a command post. You're rolling around in a vehicle or on foot, so you're quiet unless you need to talk. Yeah,
Yeah, in a way,
that
we
has to be
given
modeled.
the electronic signature problem, the transmission of intent and the ability to react within an intent becomes even more important because you can't phone in and say, "Hey, the situation's not as we expected. Give me updated orders."
Yeah,
It doesn't work, right? It's very dangerous to do so, right?
yeah. There's some really gnarly stories, especially from uh, if you look back to like 2014 or 2013. I'm blanking a little bit on the exact year, but the first time the Ukrainians and the Russians were
Yeah,
clashing,
2014. Yeah.
there was an instance where, because of some sloppy signal emissions control, a
Hmm.
whole battalion of Ukrainians got hit by rocket artillery, and they were wiped out within like 30 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Like
I actually
hundreds of people. Yeah.
heard that story. Yeah. So if you look at there's so much complexity in modern operations. Drill down a little bit on what the decision making is, the theme of the decision making. What do you focus on? Is it maneuver? Is it application of fires? What is it that you're trying to get the players to enjoy making decisions about?
First thing is I want them to be able to formulate a plan. It's become more important recently
Hmm.
with the changes to the rule set. And then I want them to actually be experiencing the friction of maneuver warfare as it stands. Because
Okay.
something you'll probably see in even like World War II uh, era operations is essentially like you have vehicles that can cross the whole of the operation or the whole of the area of operation within like 2 hours or something like that. They can roll at 40 kilometers an hour. They can cross, within a few hours, the whole of the operation. So how do you, like, what's actually preventing these formations from just
Yeah,
moving
right.
about crazily. And it's like, well, the friction, the enemy's there, they're stopping you. Um, and also like organizing hundreds or thousands of people to try to move them all together as one cohesive, shape or formation rather.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Yeah, right. And all that, those individual characteristics get kind of torn, chewed up by just the friction of coordination, uh, technical complexity, everything. Yeah,
So
that's
it's
it.
like
Hmm.
perhaps a better way to put it would be to say, like, I want them to make a plan and then adapt that plan on the fly. If they feel stressed by that, that's probably, or I would imagine that's the accurate experience for, a brigade commander or a division commander.
So let's talk through techniques a little bit, so umpires can listen in on the mind of Whisper. Um, Pieces. How do you approach pieces and maps and kind of the assets for your game? Are you uh, you know certainly with modern warfare, there's lots of opportunities for fun graphics and things, but I know people get kind of um, very creative about some of that. What's your approach?
Simple works.
Okay.
I definitely am a fan of, especially recently, trying to use let's say you have like uh, um, what's there's a set of blocks or pieces that a lot of people use pretty consistently, especially for like World War II titles that aren't Otovsky's, that represent like infantry and
Right.
recon, etc. Those work. Like
Mhm.
OKS uses these same pieces for
Okay.
their games.
Yeah.
They represent a center of gravity, not like a true position of the unit. So if you want to be fancy as an umpire, you can draw, lightly shaded like blue or red or green or whatever color of your choice to represent, the how a unit is spread or where it's focusing its strength. But if all you have is a piece and you're not tracking anything else, that'll be sufficient for how you can, communicate to players like this is where your guys are. Um, for the rest of it, it's all like dressing to whatever scenario you're trying to sell. So,
Right.
Iwo Jima or Market Garden, if they were, we pretend for a second that they work under the same rule set. Supply is important, right? Your guys need water, they need food, they need fuel, they need bullets. So you track that. If it's not important to the scenario, you get rid of that. You don't have to track it because if players aren't making a decision based off that information, it's superfluous. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Um, so that's kind of how I approach pieces. The only other thing I would add to that is it, I don't know if it's a quirk of our community or if if perhaps like I'm misunderstanding something because I haven't run into it whenever and I've grabbed like random friends and told them, hey, test this scenario out for me in real life, right? But people want to split off units almost like infinitely.
Yeah, right.
Um, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it
So
is.
like a division
It is.
commander commanding a
I don't know
platoon.
what it is. It is I think it is a quirk of this community. Right.
Yeah, a division commander is probably not giving direct orders to a platoon unless they're like special operators. Instead, he's probably looking at most two layers down. So
Right.
down to like battalion level, he might dictate, "Hey, battalion, one of the third brigade, move over to this hill." More likely, he's saying, "Hey, brigade, send one of your battalions to this hill." And then it kind of that's the other thing is I only ever let my players go 2 layers deep. That is a rule I have. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's paradoxical that a community whose backbone is the friction of not knowing things you can't immediately see or hear, if you will, that people send units off into the hinterland, right? So if you give them 4 units as a commander, we're playing in a system where you could lose track of one of them if you send them away. I'm always surprised that I scratch my head when players say, "Okay, I want all 4 of my units to go in different directions, and I'll stay in the middle." It's like, regardless of period, right? And so it's a that it's not control, but it's the ability to command means you do have to maintain some level of connection. It is funny. So that's why I laughed when you said split off their units. Is people they love to send
Uh,
cavalry units away on missions, 40 kilometers away. And then they say, "Where'd that guy go?" Well, he just wandered off.
I had a very enjoyable moment in one of my IRL test games. So I pulled a couple of friends together and I had them throw a couple of brigades at each other, just to like make sure that combat resolution worked. And one of them swore up and down that because of something like Blue Force Tracker, they would have been able to know where Company A was out in the jungle. And I was like, well, the problem is you're jammed. How are you in contact with them?
Right.
I guess you got to send a runner, right? It's,
Right, right. I send a runner on a motorcycle. Yeah, I think that's it's a thing that can be learned if umpired well, and I think it's a challenge to all of us as umpires to show players that there's a diminished ability to control if you send people far away.
yep.
And sometimes I think we give a little slack on that. I know I do. So but I can always consider myself the first guilty party in any error that's made before I give advice. What do you use for how do you do research? So are you a blog listener? Do you go into publications online, PDFs? What's your preferred approach to get information?
I kind of run the whole like gamut. I have listened to a handful of podcasts by like veterans talking about like specific like instant or like conflicts that they've been in. I hesitate to say battle because sometimes it's like, oh,
Sure.
they're talking about their experience getting IED'd, right?
Right.
Um, uh, and there are more professional ones that talk about, hey, we're talking to Colonel so and so who is going to talk about Taiwan for a minute,
Right.
and how that conflict might shape out if it happens. I also have read a whole like rotation of books. Most recently, Praxis Tacticum,
Hmm.
which I believe I recommended down in the IKS channel for
You did,
books.
and I immediately put an image of the cover of the my copy up right underneath it as a
Oh,
way to say,
you own it. Oh, dang! I
yeah,
didn't
yeah, yeah.
realize.
That's why you put that up, and I put a copy of the cover right underneath it. So yeah, yeah,
I really enjoyed it. It like a lot of other stuff in you're learning about either history or nonfiction. It can be dry, but that was a lot of fun. Like seeing, all right, how does someone who teaches others how to do these conflicts, that has experienced these conflicts, like teach how do you do platoon tactics, how do you do company tactics? So it's really
yeah,
good. I
yeah.
recommend it. I've also uh, gosh, what is its name? It was the one I read prior. I'm gonna just pull it up on my phone real quick so I can
Yeah.
pull this name up.
So you're a reader, it sounds like.
I read, I listen,
Yes.
and I also see how other war games have done it, like Flashpoint Campaigns I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, like I like how they do their command system. The dream would be to be able to adapt how they do it to a Kriegsspiel scenario, but I don't know if I have the talent for it. On Operations by B.A. Friedman. That was the other one recently.
I have that book too. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Um,
I've also read or I haven't read like cover to cover, but I have referenced the Army field manuals under the U.S. Army, and I found some resources for like UK field manuals for like their Navy.
I love old field manuals. Yeah, I can't claim to be encyclopedic with it, but then I start using airland battle doctrine, and that dates me. So I have to be careful with. We have to
Oh,
be
hey.
careful with old concepts. What? How did you find the IKS, or how did it find you?
Oh my god! So I came across the Kriegspiel like Reiswitz rules a little bit prior to COVID. At the time I was like working even more crazy hours than I do now, even though
Hmm.
I wasn't at school. So I was like, man, I just wanted an opportunity to try this out. This looks really cool. I loved like normal tabletop wargaming or even just tabletop RPGs. Was a fan of history. Loved Dan Carlin, like for instance. I listened to his stuff, and so it seemed really cool, but I never had the time. And then COVID rolled in. Suddenly, I had a lot of time, and I saw I think it was the first Grand Gettysburg that IKS ran on
Okay,
YouTube,
that one seems
and
to be have been a very effective. net to bring in some talent. The first Grand Gettysburg, particularly people of your vintage in the IKS, right? It's great.
It was a super cool battle to watch. At least I know things have evolved since then. Like umpires have gotten better, rule sets have gotten better. Gettysburg has been done, a million more times. But it was a really cool battle, and yeah, I have a lot of fun memories of just
I
sitting there
tell you
listening
what,
to it.
though, I have. I was one of those people who would say, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to even hear the term Gettysburg again." A couple years. I've actually been on at Gettysburg 3 times. I've done a staff ride with a guy from the War College. I mean, I've done Gettysburg. I've done a lot of Gettysburg, and I didn't really get Gettysburg until one of the IKS sessions where I had to kind of piece it together what happened in the context of the players making decisions, and it just kind of landed, and I was like, Gettysburg. So you can. This is more of a pitch for the way we do Kriegsspiel. I mean, I had a huge amount of exposure to it, but it was really digging into it that I finally got it in my bones, which I thought was super interesting, and it opened up my mind around even these tried and true campaigns. You maybe don't understand them until you really have to make the decisions that go behind them.
That kind of makes me think of how it's kind of funny. Everyone laughs about it when it happens, but whenever someone runs a historical scenario of like Iwo Jima or Gettysburg, and they're like, "I'm going to do it different. I'm going to do it better than the commanders there," and then they end up making the same like decisions almost, or getting the same results by the end of it. And it's like, yeah, like, there's a reason these professionals like arrived at the plans that they did with the information that they had.
Right.
And Gettysburg is one of those examples. Like, how many times have people fought over, little round top with not, necessarily the same exact units that were fighting over it, maybe not the same exact number, but it's always a little close because they're like, nah, like little round top's a good anchor. That's why it was used as a flank or as the flank for the Union Army, right?
Which inspires another thought. What is your approach on? I'll just call it player knowledge. So do you like lots of new players come in and you're exposing them to some of the ideas in your games, or do you like a crew of 10 that you've run through multiple scenarios? What are your thoughts on your player group?
For me, it's kind of the Wild West. Anytime a new player is like, "Hey, is this a good new player scenario?" I'm like, "Yeah, everyone else is just as green as you are
Okay.
in this era." So, like, it's okay. I'm willing to teach. I have to teach everyone.
Okay, so
Um,
you like a fresh, you're open to a fresh crew. And the reason I bring that up is that Gettysburg. I wonder, as we're talking, if the reason people are so attracted to Gettysburg is it's deepening knowledge. And so the more people study it and game it, the more they're actually getting it in their bones.
yeah, you start
In terms
developing
of
a meta, right?
rather than having that new car smell in every single battle you play, right? It's just an inspiring thought. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I wonder if that but, we get a big influx of new players every now and again into the IKS. People who are interested in the hobby. I wonder if there might be like a common scenario that we could start running people through routinely. I know we have open Saturdays, and Red versus Blue pops up
Right.
on that. There's something Mets map every time. But maybe
Yeah.
like the same scenario over and over can be a nice way to introduce people to rules.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think that James's efforts with the newcomer game is trying to do, I think, a version of that. I heard a crazy story about the American football coach, John Madden. When he was a young guy, he went to a Vince Lombardi, who was a famous American football coach if you're from overseas, or if you're from outside the United States. But he went to a camp basically where they were teaching coaching. And he said he was furious because halfway through the day, they'd covered only one play, but like every single inch of this play. And then he realized 3/4 of the way through the day that everything about coaching American football was embodied in studying one play. And I just thought that was such a cool story. If you think about a Gettysburg or the Mets map or whatever, you could just study that one battle over and over and over and learn new things. as you know as you go through it. So
Yeah,
um,
that makes a lot of sense, intuitively at least. Uh, Hearing you tell the story, because like, um, I've not been to West Point. Will never be to West Point, but they teach a lot of the same specific like battles or skirmishes over and over again. So like
right.
Winters, attacking the anti-air guns in Normandy with Easy Company. That's something that pops up a lot, from what I understand. Like every class gets some version of that. And then
Hmm.
they also do things from the Civil War and like talk about the operations that General Lee and Grant, etc., like all went through, just to teach the art of it. And also like there has to be some common. The intrusive thought that just hit me in the middle of that sentence was, I guess there has to be some kind of common touchstone to teach doctrine, and that might be why they teach the same battles over and over, even if obviously, like, you know, Carentan is almost 100 years ago, and the Civil War is even further back. So, like,
Yeah.
what's the use of teaching these to like modern cadets? And it's like, you're some things always are going to be the same, right?
Well, the decisions you make, which is what we game, right? So the decision, the decisions that you make in real life in these historical cases, and we have a chance to actually create decisions in our games such that people can understand Gettysburg or understand Carrington or understand these different scenarios more effectively. Food for thought. That's great. Now you're a busy guy and you just mentioned it. How do you organize your time? Uh, we all understand you have a growing family, but how do you organize your time now to do this stuff? Are you a late at night guy? Old James gets 10 o'clock at nights when he starts doing his stuff, he says. So how do you organize your time so you can even do any of this research?
Um, yeah, my family's growing. I had a son uh, like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Time's
Yeah.
an illusion, so I'm sorry I don't know that number.
Well,
So I'm
congratulations.
figuring that part. Oh, thank you. I'm figuring out that part of like how am I going to balance that portion. But even before then, I work full time. I'm one of my titles is technically senior consultant, which is very fancy for saying I kind of
Uh,
do a little bit of everything actually. And then I also, decided I wanted to finish my degree, so I'm going to school full time as well.
you got
The
a full
answer is I
plate.
get. Oh, go ahead.
You got a full plate.
Yeah. Uh, my wife misses me. The way I balance it in the past is I would just find an hour here or an hour there, and
Right.
sometimes I would be able to section off like a whole like afternoon or something, because life needs tending to. I just made a joke about my wife missing me, but she needs time too, and I do give that to her. And I'll give time to my family in the future, my job and my school. Um,
Yeah. Right.
I literally just find it somehow. There's no magic method.
Well, that's how you know it's a hobby of passion is that you find a few minutes to look into stuff and get it going. So, do you do any live, or is it all play by post, given your schedule?
Um, when my schedule has been more full, for lack of a better term,
Right.
it has been live games were just easier, like because I can fit, I know for a fact like on Saturday I'll have a 4 hour window where I can do everything, um whereas like with play by post I might have to do an hour every few nights,
Right.
and I don't necessarily know when I'll have that hour, so it's rougher to schedule.
That's
So
so interesting, because people will often say that play by post is more amenable to a schedule, but your point is your evenings are so dynamic. You can't even put aside regular time. That's fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, and that's an umpire thing. So like players who don't have a ton of time, by all means, like play by post is amazing for your schedule. I'm
Right.
playing in like World War II Malta game under Crises and Tack and Carter, and I just do 10 or 15 minutes. If I'm super busy, 10 or 15 minutes one day out of a week, that's enough for that. But as an umpire, it's a little bit more involved, especially if like you're handling assistant umpires and more than a normal load of players.
And just the resolution itself takes a
Yeah, it
couple
can take
hours
an
if it's
hour, yeah,
decently
or two,
constructed. And
yeah.
in your scenarios, you've got a lot of detail you got to work through in terms of weapon systems and all sorts of variables, right?
Uh, yeah, it can be that's where the abstraction was coming in. The Persian Gulf scenario, and I don't know if you were an observer for that, but we were doing only air warfare, and then I had a little sprinkling of naval assets running in like a carrier group, the Truman actually, and kind of a fictional praying mantis 2, just purely to get like air combat in and airstrikes, etc. Uh, Resolution ended up being like 45 minutes by the time me and the team got through it, or yeah, towards the end of it.
Hmm.
And writing the reports, because I decided to go ham, that's what ended up taking the most amount of time. But in reality, I could have cut that down to being like an hour and change.
Right.
I'm really proud of that.
Yeah. Okay. So you working on. You've got your next project coming up. Do you play at all, or you said you played some with Crises? How much do you play versus umpire? How do you balance that? Are you mostly umpiring, or you balance the two?
Nowadays, I mostly umpire.
Okay.
That might change due to like scheduling commitments, but we'll see. I like umpiring. It's kind of like a lot of folks in the community are TTRPG players before they became Kriegsspielers.
Right.
They'll get it of like once you start DMing, it's kind of hard to take a step back from being an experienced curator or an experienced creator. It's very fulfilling.
Are you an old DM? Is that where your background is?
Um, Kind of. I'm a relatively young guy, but I played TTRPG since I was like 5. My folks actually met
Yeah.
playing the original version of D&D, so it's kind of always been a part of my life. So I started DMing pretty early on, and I've loved it.
Yeah. There you go. Back in the good old days when Gary Gygax was still around, that's when a 20-sided dice meant something. There's an old guy thing to say. Awesome. So growing up on D&D, good for you.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
cool. Okay. Well, what advice would you give to a young umpire or someone who's just starting out? I know that there's a lot of varied advice that people give in the new umpire channel, and this dusts up every once in a while. But given the fact that you focus on modern, what advice would you give a new umpire?
um, command friction is everything, and read about modern battles. The Gulf War is a common touchstone of mine. I know that's not quite true modern. You don't have drones that are running around, but if you can get the essence of maneuver warfare with all of the um, reality of a transparent battlefield, no one does anything that's truly secret nowadays. You're going to do well, and if you mess it up, that's okay. Um, Being an umpire means improvising as you go along. It's a yes and or a yes but to players. You know.
Okay, cool. Command friction. I don't know if you've ever heard Mick Ryan is the Australian general that comes on to some of these podcasts that we probably both listen to. He said if um, and this is in reaction to your comment about command friction, which I think is a good one. He said, if the battlefield was truly transparent, there would be no surprises in warfare, and we see examples of surprises all the time. And very recently we've seen examples of surprises in the Middle East and in Ukraine. So there is no transparency on the battlefield. It's just a different kind of command friction. Right? So I thought it was an interesting point for our gaming, our gaming universe. So
Yeah. The
cool.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. I cut you off.
No, I was going to say Mick Ryan's popped up a couple times for sure in
Yeah,
listening to podcasts.
he's a good podcast guest, that's for sure. Was there any last thing you'd like to share with IKS umpires? Because this is a show of umpires for umpires. We're not. It's just a fairly closed knit community here, or a tight community. What last words for the umpires?
Um, you're all awesome, and you know, as a sometimes player, I always enjoy every scenario that I've gone into. Um, just keep it up, y'all. It's a lot of fun. We're building this community.
That's great, man. Thanks for coming on, taking a time out from family duties. Those who didn't don't know this, Whisper and I've been trying to get this put together a little bit because both of our families had us running around a little bit. But I appreciate the fact we had a chance to sit down and talk it through, and it's a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.